What I can say though, there's no evidence that the governor himself had sought to be excessive, and certainly I don't know that I have seen any case of corruption also that would, create an issue in terms of undermining the governor's integrity.
Intimately. So the question as to who leaked the letter is probably more important. I really don't know. It could very well have been leaked by someone other than Prime Minister Gonzalves himself, for reasons well known to themselves. But I just assume that, look, Prime Minister Gonzalves is the most experienced Prime Minister. He's the leader of Prime Ministers in the region. He's been in office for 2 decades plus. He is not going to make a mistake like that lightly.
The Prime Minister says, I just discovered this. Oh my gosh, I'm so shocked. He must go. It's very much similar to Donald Trump 1 hour after the plane crash, blaming it on DEI hires. You have to go through a due process. The Prime Minister of St. Vincent should not be making these inflammatory public statements when he, quote, just found out about this. Make a statement, have it investigated and so on. But to call for the resignation of the governor, I think, is highly unusual and highly improper.
The Monetary Council has not met us yet. I'm sure we'll have to meet at some point to look at this issue, but we don't have all of the information. What I will say here, clearly there are some governance failures there. And, going forward, we're going to have to strengthen the reporting mechanisms and the accountability mechanisms to strengthen the governance framework, because at the level of the Monetary Council, I would say we were caught flat-footed in terms of the amount of money spent. But I don't know that we can escape the responsibility. One can argue that we ought to have known. At the level of the directorship, I don't know the extent to which they knew how much money was spent. What I can say, though, there's no evidence that the governor himself had sought to be excessive, and certainly I don't know that I have seen any case of corruption also that would, create an issue in terms of undermining the governor's integrity. Maybe, perhaps. And again, look, I feel that at this point, until we get a proper report, we may have to set up some independent committee to look at this issue. I feel it may be a little injudicious to me to come to any conclusion at this point, other than to say that the amounts that were spent on the building has raised concerns, and many of us as Monetary Council members, we are concerned. But it may be a little premature for me to make any definitive statements at this time, other than to say that, the matter has to be dealt with and resolved, and at some point the Monetary Council will meet and discuss this issue. Okay. And certainly we'll have to keep the public informed as to how this matter is ultimately resolved.
All right. I want us to come back home now and look at the recently held parliamentary debates. Both the upper house and the lower house have met already, and this is. And
I should add here too, just a little caveat. I am not the chairman of the Monetary Council, although there has been a request for me to serve as the chairman of the Monetary Council, because what happened, there was a change of government in Anguilla. Just about a week ago.
Yes.
And I'll be the incoming chairman in July of this year. So there has been a request by my colleagues, and even the governor himself has asked me if I could make myself available to take over the governorship from now. But I have not
accepted.
No. I probably will anyway. But the point I'm making is that I've been addressed as the current governor. I keep saying governor, chairman of the Monetary Council. I am not.
I do want to begin with an overarching question. Of course, Brian, you worked with the Caribbean Development Bank at some level, of course, not at the governance level, but you have some intimate knowledge of governance in respect of what that looks like. Let us first and foremost talk about the appointments of leaders of development banks in the region or financial institutions such as the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, which has that fiduciary oversight responsibility. Obviously, some might argue that it should be strictly based on merit and that other factors should not come into play. Do other factors come into play when we think about the appointment of presidents of banks and governors of banks in the region? Brian, I want to start with you on that question.
Well, you said I'm going to make sense of this. I can't. I can't make any sense of it because I'm struggling myself. Yes, of
Yes.
course. Yeah, I mean, CDB and ECCB and CARICOM and all these regional institutions and so on, of course, they are all run basically by either the prime ministers of each country or the ministers of finance of each country. So I find it highly disingenuous for the Prime Minister of St. Vincent to come out and express outrage and shock and horror about all of this. What, you haven't been listening to your son? You are on the council. His son, the Minister of Finance, is on the council. They've been doing this thing for 2 or 3 years. So there's another agenda here. Of course, what it is, who knows? But there is another agenda here, and I find it very distasteful that Timmy is being held out to dry like this.
Yeah.
You know,
Go ahead, Brian. Finish your train of thought, please.
the Prime Minister says, I just discovered this. Oh my gosh, I'm so shocked. He must go. It's very much similar to Donald Trump 1 hour after the plane crash, blaming it on DEI hires. You have to go through a due process. The Prime Minister of St. Vincent should not be making these inflammatory public statements when he, quote, just found out about this. Make a statement, have it investigated and so on. But to call for the resignation of the governor, I think, is highly unusual and highly improper.
Peter, let us get your take on this. Brian seems to be saying here that there appears to be some abdication of responsibility on the part of Gonzalves in relation to reporting obligations of his own son, who is the finance minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who has representation on the board. Incidentally, Mr. Gonzalves, that's Gonzalves Jr., Camilo here, he was the chairman of the Monetary Council. Just last year, I believe, he was the chairman of the Monetary Council. So let us get your take on this. Is this, as Brian is articulating here, some sort of conspiracy to rid the bank of Mr. Timothy Antoine and his leadership?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to go back to the question that you originally asked, Brian, although I don't necessarily disagree with what he's been saying.
Yes.
In terms of what are the factors that impact on the selection of a president? And
Yes.
certainly qualifications are key. But I think that there are other factors. And I mean, we all understand, just like in the selection of a pope, it's not who believes in God most. It's a question of who is better connected politically. And as much as I would like to think that these posts are above politics, the reality is that they're not. So nationality is a key factor in terms of the ECCB, because I would imagine that the heads would pay attention to the nationality of the placeholder, to the extent that you want to have a fair and equal representation of people over time. So individual countries will want to have a chance. And then there's the whole question of the age of the individual. I think that's a factor. The age is something that they would pay attention to. And then the extent to which the individual is well connected and may have an outlook that is consistent with what the heads may have as priorities. So I do think the process is political. I don't delude myself in that regard. And I think it's not unreasonable that at that level the process would be political. Having said that, if we look at the question of the selection, and the fact that the current placeholder appears to be attacked, or appears to be being attacked in terms of his execution of his duties, I don't necessarily want to run to that conclusion, because I am fully aware of the fact also that this letter was private. The letter was leaked. I don't know whether it was leaked deliberately or otherwise. So while I do agree that Prime Minister Gonzalves is clearly up to something, I'm not sure what exactly he's up to. Brian's points are valid. There's a board. This decision would have to have been approved. I don't know whether there are cost overruns, which would not have been approved. I don't know about those details. But on the face of it, yeah, it does seem a bit odd that you're raising these questions, years after the fact when a decision was taken, and you run with it. I don't know whether he would have supported a less lavish project. Indeed, I don't even know if the project is necessarily considered to be lavish. The facilities that the head of the CDB has in Barbados are not bad at all, and certainly comparable to what I've seen in St. Kitts and Nevis. Our central bank governor also has a fairly palatial residence. The prime minister's residence in Barbados is quite palatial. There are clear benefits to having comfortable accommodation for a person at that level. They have to entertain and whatnot, and I think it's kind of befitting the job. So I really don't know what Prime Minister Gonzalves is up to.
Peter, if you can pause for a second, you're frozen. I'm not too sure.
Yeah,
Brian, are you seeing Peter?
I frozen for a while, but I just assumed that I should continue talking.
Yeah, I will put some B-roll over that. But
okay, no problem.
Are you able to log off and log back in quickly?
Sure, no problem. I'll do that.
Yeah. Because I don't know what happened there.
Let me do that. Let me just
yes,
say
yes, Brian. Yes.
that I've been to the president of CDB's house, not the current president, but I've been to Warren Smith's house where he lived when I was working at CDB. It is in no way comparable to this palace. In no way. It's an ordinary house. It's a nice house. It's not a palace. It's just an ordinary, nice Barbadian house. That's it. This thing, I tell you, I'm shaking my head. I don't know what got into the board to approve such an extravagant design. The question is also, too, you have to look at the country factor, not just ECCB. If ECCB is domiciled in St. Kitts, whose responsibility is it to build the house for the governor of the ECCB? Is it the ECCB or is it St. Kitts and Nevis? I have a suspicion it might be the latter. I also have a suspicion that, certain factors were at play when this contract was given out. It was nowhere near $22 million. And the questions have to be asked before anybody starts shouting off about asking for people's heads and wanting people to resign. Get the facts.
Correct. Yes, absolutely, and that is very important. Getting to the facts. But Peter, here you're back again. You're not frozen anymore. But I want to pick up on what you said at the end of your statement about Prime Minister Gonzalves' intention here. Are you suggesting that perhaps there might be some sort of a sinister motive here on his part? Because I mean, it just appears as if he just found out about this. In the way that this letter was written, it's as though he just found out about this. That he has not been on the ground or not paying attention to what the business of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and he seems to want to put all of this at the feet of one man without again acknowledging, as Brian just articulated, the entire governance structure here. So let us pick up on that. Is this political?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think that's probably the best way to answer it. And I also think that it's difficult to come to conclusions clearly in a situation where he said that the letter was leaked. Well, the letter was leaked. The Prime Minister indicated that he took some ownership of the letter, but he made it clear the letter was leaked, and he hasn't really been willing to discuss those kinds of details in the public domain. But let's look at the way that the former president of the Caribbean CDB was ousted. And you recall that there was a cloak and dagger operation that was really very similar. The reality is, in this instance, the directors obviously handled the business better, where they went behind closed doors and put the guy on leave, and then before we knew it, he was fired, and we heard of legal action being taken. I've never heard why. I've heard through the grapevine why, and I've had conversations with people who appear to have been involved, but I've never really heard what the reason was. And I just think that in this instance, it's clear that the business wasn't handled intimately. So the question as to who leaked the letter is probably more important. I really don't know. It could very well have been leaked by someone other than Prime Minister Gonzalves himself, for reasons well known to themselves. But I just assume that, look, Prime Minister Gonzalves is the most experienced prime minister. He's the dean of prime ministers in the region. He's been in office for 2 decades plus. He is not going to make a mistake like that lightly. And I think that if there is something behind this, that he's getting. I mean, he knows all this. He knows that he was on the board. He knows that he's probably one of the longest standing persons that would have nominated individuals. He would have been a director himself many years ago when he was finance minister. I don't think that any of these things have escaped him. And whatever it is that he's up to, I assume is well founded. And I'm anxious to hear why. The Grenada connection is interesting. In the same way that the former president of the CDB was St. Lucian, and that connection was also interesting. So I am these are very heavy, one could say tall grass, and I am not anxious to wade into waters that are above my head in this instance. Yeah.
And of course, Brian, and I will pick up on what Peter just articulated here in respect of what happened at the Caribbean Development Bank. Now, I know that is something that you paid attention to as well, with great interest, because, of course, that is an institution that you were associated with at some level. You're not representing them here today. But let us talk about, do you see similarities with what is happening here with what occurred at the Caribbean Development Bank, where it's alleged that Prime Minister Mia Mottley orchestrated the ouster of the St. Lucian president at the time? And of course, we have to allegedly, yes, I was about to say we have to establish that caveat. But at the time of his ouster, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, again, Peter, and you do mention this nationalistic type of thing here, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia came out in support of the president when he was under fire at the time. So, Brian, I want you to pick up on that, please.
Oh boy, you're putting me on the spot here now.
That's what we do.
Good.
That is what we do.
Well, like Peter says, and like you say, I worked there for 5 years at CDB, and I know a lot of people at CDB, and I also know Daniel Best, the current president, who I think is an excellent choice. How we get there is another matter. I think that if you're appointed by the Board of Governors, then you should be sacked or fired or suspended by the Board of Governors. I think it was disappointing the way it went from down up, not up down, on that whole issue with Dr. Leon. And I know that CDB is going to pay dearly for this because the court case is pending about that. Yes. And, Dr. Leon, I don't know the ins and outs. I know, from talking to people, I know some hearsay and so on, which I'm not at liberty to say at all, but it was the whole procedure was very badly handled, I would have to say. And this is not the first time that this has happened at CBD. There have been other instances when people have been removed in a very untransparent manner. Just leave it at that.
Right. Yes, Brian, go ahead. You wanted to add something else.
Yeah, I was saying, but again, it goes back to what Peter and you were saying. Of course, in the choice of a president or governor of any institution in the region, merit is this much and politics is this much. Yeah. So clearly there are forces at stake behind all of this, trying to get their man in, their woman in, their man out, and so on and so forth. And that's the real politics of not just Caribbean, but all of these international institutions. Countries, we say it's our turn. Oh, we haven't had a Jamaican for 10 years. It's time for a Jamaican, and so on and so on. And then people will be put into place, and there will be backstabbing, and there will be little plots and counterplots. And it's a shame because, the institution deserves better.
Yeah. Now, let us talk about, because another part of this story, and again, we really want to localize this angle as well in the context of St. Kitts, as Brian just articulated, and the role of because of course, St. Kitts and Nevis, they are the country that hosts the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Now, in respect of this particular project, the residence for the governor, of course, we also have to make the point that Mr. Timothy Antoine will not be in that position forever, and he will not be going back to Grenada with the mansion. So, again, the way that this is framed, as though, it's his place. It's not. It belongs to the central bank. Yeah? So, let us talk about the whole question of the local angle of this in the context of St. Kitts and Nevis. I'm not too sure if Brian, you've been hearing anything there. Peter just logged off. I'm not sure what happened there, but there is a St. Kitts Nevis angle here, but also the whole question of procurement processes and things like that. There are allegations that this project started
Mm,
before COVID, and
mm.
with COVID there was a pause and there was significant cost overruns and things like that. You would think that a financial institution such as the ECCB would want to practice prudent financial management. Yes.
And let me say this: I know Timmy Antoine very well. I knew him when he was here, when he was a PF Finance. Um, and he's a very humble man. He's a very Christian man. I am sure that he is squirming and hating all of this.
Yeah.
There is no way that he could be held liable or responsible for any of this. He is just the guy who's going to occupy it for a few years. Now, as for why, you have to look at the timing of this. Why all of a sudden this leaked letter comes to light?
Mm-hmm.
And the person who leaked it and the person who authorized the leaks are two different people who, many times it's
Yeah.
like, okay, you can
Yeah.
leak it.
Yeah.
As to why, well, I don't know. Maybe, as you said, Timmy's current term of office expires in 2026. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
the Prime Minister of St. Vincent has another candidate that he thinks could do a better job in replacing him.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe someone not too far from him. These are all maybes and it's all conjectures and it's all hearsays. And this should not be the case. We should not be spreading basically get gossip and rumor about this. They should come out with a statement and make it
Yeah.
clear what is happening. And without that, it's all conjecture. For example, me hearsay, as they say in Jamaica, I heard that one of the things is who is the contractor who's building all of this? Is he a friend of the government of St. Kitts? Why
Yeah.
are the cost overruns? Apparently, what did it start out at $7 million and then go up and up and up and up? And after COVID, it just ballooned. These are questions that have to be answered before anybody makes these inflammatory statements and calling for heads. And I find that to be very unprofessional.
Yeah, yeah. Let me bring back Peter here. Now, Peter,
Mhm.
we have also been attempting to obtain a local angle from a journalist in St. Kitts. I understand that the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, Mr. Drew, journalists did ask him about this, but he made very few comments on the matter. Again, everyone seemed to be tight-lipped about this. But what have you been hearing in respect of what Kittitians and Nevisians are saying about this?
Well, no, I mean, I've been hearing about the political angle, and the argument is being suggested that, Labour and certainly Dr. Drew, as the head of Labour, has an interest in this type of matter, and, they've been exercising the options in that regard. I don't know anything about that other than what I've been hearing, but I would say that the suggestion that it can be a Labour operative that is benefiting and that Dr. Drew is facilitating is something that I think is quite ridiculous. Look, if the building is built in St. Kitts, somebody has to build it. The political identity of the contractor is irrelevant. I assume that the contractor is qualified to do it, and that's the basis on which they're chosen. I don't know about cost overruns. As I said, all of these are things which would have to come out in terms of internal investigations, but I think that Dr. Drew is right not to wade into it. The decision would have been taken when he wasn't even Prime Minister. And I think that it's right for him not to wade into it, or alternatively, Dr. Harris, for that matter, to wade into it.
For Prime Minister Timothy Harris, yes.
Precisely, yeah, because it's not really, to me, they're relevant. I think that we have to wait to see where this conversation goes, where the investigation goes, and if anything will come out. And certainly, if we use the CDB thing as an example, years later, we don't know. We know that there's a lawsuit, and I suspect that one may very well be forthcoming if the current governor is forced to resign as well. But you're saying pay dearly. The CDB will pay whatever the lawsuit brings, and I think the people of the Caribbean will also pay that as part of our own contribution to the CDB. I think in the same way, the ECCB will probably have to shell out some money in this regard. But if the fundamental issue is that egregious, then one could argue that it is worth it. In the case of the CDB president, the suggestions that I have heard that are behind the reason that he was forced to resign, I find it a bit peculiar. Largely because it's relatively common practice across the Caribbean, which is not to put too fine a point on it. But the argument is that this could be what is behind it. I find it a bit odd. Then maybe there's something that I'm missing. And I think this is the same case, I would say, with the governor of the ECCB. I mean, I met the individual once or twice, and I have every respect for him. I mean, I heard about his Christian values, which I think are largely irrelevant in this context. Because, you know, if it is that there was an overstep, if there was a breach of whatever regulations, then ultimately that is something that can exist independently, and he would have to give response. So we would need to know what happens internally, and perhaps we never will know. The reality is that these are jobs where there's a level of guardrails imposed around them that don't always allow for us to have a prime minister that believes, look, something is up, pick up the telephone and call and say, look, I really think you ought to resign over this, in the way that a minister can be dismissed. And for that reason, we may have these games being set up that will seem to facilitate a situation in which there's a grounded, you know, heavily held belief that an individual has gone in a different direction. You made a valid point, though, that the building is ECCB property. It will remain in St. Kitts in time immemorial. And it is an asset to the bank, which the bank will continue to hold as an asset. And I think that's a very important point. It's not about a personal effort. At the same time, however, decisions of an individual who is holding the post of governor are attributable to him. But I do agree that the asset will continue to be that of the banks for time immemorial.
Absolutely. And let me bring back Peter. We may have to have you log out and log back in again. Very good. We're not going to cover what you said there, but let us pick up on that, Brian. Is there anything else you wish to add to what Peter just articulated here?
Yeah. You know, when we talk about the asset, you know, being the property of CCB, and I'm sorry that Peter's not going to hear this because I said it before he was off again.
Yes.
There's an asset, and there's an asset that is so big it becomes a liability. The president of Barbados' house is an ordinary house. It's a nice house, but president of CDB. It's a nice house, but it's not a palace. If you build a palace like this, and this is a palace, there's no doubt about it. Let's be clear, this is a palace. It's not going to look well for example, when the president has functions at his house, and he's got, you know, dignitaries and representatives and diplomats from England, America, France, Canada, and whatever. They're going to look around and say, this is not good. This is a waste of money, and it's not going to look well on the ECCB itself to have the president in this enormous mansion. Where the president of the CDB is living in an ordinary house. I'm sure the president of CARICOM, well, I can't speak for that. But, you know, to have that kind of an opulent mansion sends the wrong signal. And it sends the signals that we're wasting money here. And that's the signal that everybody who walks away from a cocktail party at that house is going to say, wow, did you see that mansion? And that's not good. And like I said, I know Timmy reasonably well. He is being hung out to dry in all of this, and I'm sure he didn't come up with this idea to build this mansion. That I can be sure of.
Peter, you hear what Brian is saying here? The collective decision, because again, two things can be true at once. There can be a conversation about the size of this facility, as well as a conversation about the collective decision to determine that this is what you need to house the governor's the house for it to be the governor's residence for the ECCB. So pick up on what Brian just articulated here. Too opulent?
No, he was spot on. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical challenges, so I had to be in and out. But when I came back, I heard what he was saying, and I agree with Brian entirely. From the looks of it, I think that the house is opulent. That type of thing doesn't work for me, and I think it turns off people. You know, I recall a conversation and I had with one of the head of one of the institutions in European Union, and the fact that, you know, when member states walk past executives of that association in first class and they go to sit in economy, it looks bad. Yeah. And I think it's the same kind of situation where you have borrowing member countries that are part of this thing. And, you know, some of them don't live that way, and they walk into this palace and they see where it is. I don't know if the St. Kitts Prime Minister has an official residence. I don't know if the Antiguan Prime Minister has official residence. The Barbados Prime Minister does.
Well, the Grenadian Prime Minister has an official residence, but he doesn't live there. So that is another issue as well. Go ahead.
I've seen the Grenada Prime Minister's official residence. I've actually even been in on a for tea on an occasion, coffee really. But it's nothing
In
like
Mount
this.
Royal. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
nothing like that. No,
and I
Mount
think
Royal is an
that
older building, yes.
yeah, as Brian is saying, that's probably one of the things that doesn't sit well. And the reality is that if it is in St. Kitts, where the Prime Minister doesn't seem to have an official residence either, it sits uncomfortably that this is what is going on. But as Brian also said, the decision to make that residence or to establish it, and indeed, if there are cost overruns, the decision to let that escalate during COVID could not be his alone. And it is unfair to pillory the individual. But then again, I don't know that that's what's being done. I don't know whether this is a situation in which the feeling is that as person who is leader, he could have pulled back the horses and chose not to, and he didn't act efficiently in that regard. But I agree that it is appealing. CARICOM Secretary General's residence in Guyana is big, certainly by Guyanese standards. The reality is that it is not incomparable with the president of Guyana's residence, which I think is the fundamental comparison that we looked at. But when you look at that building, it is out of scale with what we would expect a governor to live in. Perhaps, yeah, I think that's the challenge.
Hi everyone, thanks for checking out the Bob Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.